Welcome back to the Rebuilt SoCal Zone podcast. I am John Switolski, your host for today. We have some very special guests here. To start, I am happy to welcome Executive Director Hasan Ikrata, the Director of Regional Planning, Coleen Clementson, and Chief Data Analytics Officer and Chief Economist, Reimagining of the San Diego Association of Governments, also known as Sandag. Welcome, everyone.
Thank you. Good to be here, John. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate you sharing your thoughts and your vision with our listeners. Sandag is embarked on developing a regional transportation plan for 2021. Your regional transportation plan is a brand new vision. It's a big and bold vision that, in my opinion, has the potential to reshape the way San Diegans move through their communities. Mr. Director, Mr. Ikrata, could you share with us what your vision is, what your plans are, and give us all that we need to know, please?
We'll be glad, John. Thank you. Again, thank you for having us. Thank you to Rebuild Southern California Partnership for the amazing work they do on behalf of California to keep this state as golden as we envisioned it from the beginning. I think in San Diego, what we're trying to do is reimagine the future of transportation system. We're trying to put a multimodal system that serves the people of San Diego, but also create economic opportunities for San Diegans. And we take a pride in the fact that this regional transportation plan is a data-driven, future mobility-oriented plan. With me today is the two highest-ranking officials at Sandag, our planning director, Coleen Clementson, and our chief executive for analytics and economy, can talk further. But again, we take pride in the fact this is a data-driven plan. We went where the data took us. It's a plan that actually going to set a precedent statewide and nationwide. And with that, I would ask actually our chief data analytics to dive into the data-driven approach that we had.
Yes, thank you. Ray, can you first start by telling us what is a data-driven approach? What do we mean when we say that?
Well, a data-driven approach is one where instead of having a conclusion and then find data to prove that your point is right, you look at the data to start with and see where it leads you. So it's a completely different approach to using data than a lot of different organizations would have used. Historically at Sandag, what we did is we had a regional plan and we revised it every 4 years. We updated the projects that were in there. Some were completed, so we moved them off of the page. We added some new ones. But what we did this last time that was fundamentally different is that we took what we're calling this data-driven approach, and it was basically a clean slate. We took a look at, we know we have current infrastructure and we had projects in the works, but what we really did is we took a look at the people in San Diego and the jobs in San Diego, and we tried to understand the relationship between the two and how people move from one to another. So we really wanted to understand how people flow throughout the region. And so we used new data that has never been really available for regional planning purposes, like cell phone data, that allow us to try to figure out where people start their trips and where they end their trips. And what we were able to determine by that is really, we found that there are these corridors where a lot of people are going from one place and they're all ending up in another place. And so they're moving along a corridor, for instance, to go to work. Okay. And by understanding exactly the volumes of people that are moving and how they're doing their stops, we're able to then really more effectively use the dollars that we're using for future development to really focus on helping solving the congestion problem, reducing GHG emissions, and really looking at social equity and making sure that this is a balanced approach.
So just to emphasize the point Ray was making, John, a data-driven approach is not an approach where you go where the politics takes you. You go where the facts takes you. If the facts said there is people living here and they need to move here, we need to accommodate that by, I believe in the past we were guilty of always trying to cater to political aspiration, and oftentimes we end up with the wrong project. This is an approach where it says, let us go where the data takes us. And I think Ray would agree that this is, when it comes to transportation planning, this is an approach that right now must be adopted by many. In addition to the data-driven approach, remember this is a $163 billion investment over 30 years. We're investing into the
Tremendous
future.
number.
It is. And we're investing into a future where our kids and grandkids need to inherit a system that the same or better than what we inherited from our fathers and grandfathers. But it's more than that. It's actually about creating opportunities, about putting people to work, and not just anywhere, but creating careers so people could live and entertain and send their kids to school and stay in California for California to continue thriving. And with that plan, we focused a lot on a multimodal approach and a future mobility approach that our planning director and her team have perfected. So I would ask Coleen to just dive a little deeper into what that plan looked like when it comes to project.
Yeah. So again, as Hasan said, this is an unprecedented investment that we're talking about in the San Diego region, $163 billion. And one of the things in the vision that is really important for folks to understand, it's a system that all works together. We have to do these regional transportation plans every 4 years. And this time, just as Ray said, we started from scratch. We used data to look at where people need to go, where they're going. What are the latest innovations in technology that we could apply? And then just really thinking about how do we make a system that works? Past plans have been just sort of a compilation of a bunch of different projects, but how do we make these things really work together and recognize that there are times when we need to make long trips, times we need to make short trips, we need to move goods throughout the region. And so there's all different types of transportation available for the different kinds of trips that we need to take. So again, it's this whole sort of system approach. So it's everything from making what we have today work better. So we think of our freeway system. How do we look at that existing right-of-way and maximize its use? And that really is how do we add in, say, a system of what we call managed lanes. So 2 lanes in each direction that are for carpools. They're told these are the areas where we can really emphasize transit. Mm-hmm. And then we connect all the freeways. So you can freely move if you're going north on Interstate 5 and you need to go east on 78. It's a smooth transition. And so that's really investing and reinvesting in what we have. Then it's the bigger investments in a higher speed commuter rail system and improving the trolley system that we already have. So this is constructing grade separation. So the trolley that we take today from the international border in San Ysidro into downtown San Diego that takes an hour, by doing improvements, grade separating, maybe additional rails where needed, we can get that trip down to 25 minutes. That makes a difference in someone's life. And as Hasan said, what we're really solving for is traffic congestion, meeting our climate goals, and addressing social equity.
So
and
that
these are the
efficiency
kinds of
reduces the commute time.
Exactly.
Right. The lifestyle choice that you're asking folks to make is to, by making this investment, instead of sitting on the freeway, you can be more efficient in your commute from the border up into the city.
Yes, you can be more efficient in your commute, number one. Number two, we're also transporting a lot of low-income people who maybe don't have another way to get to their job. And so this is another aspect as well, and having an affordable transportation option.
Issues of equity.
Issues of equity. Absolutely. You're right on, John. And then, on top of that, if we can get more people using one vehicle, again, that helps us address our climate change issues throughout the state of California. So that's just one example of a project. Another is the low sand corridor. So that's the tracks that run along the coast from San Luis Obispo through Los Angeles, through Orange County, down into central San Diego. And right now, there's a big part of that that's along a bluff that's failing.
Right. Yes.
It's been in the news. Yeah.
And it's suspended train service, which is a terrible inconvenience.
Yeah,
I'm sure ridership has plummeted because of it.
So it's ridership. This is also a major goods movement corridor. The military uses this corridor to get goods up and down from the military bases that are, from Camp Pendleton down to the Bay. And it's really part of our economic lifeblood in the San Diego region. So our plan calls for at least a $7 billion investment to get those rails off the bluffs There's parts of the rail that do a really long kind of curve way out off the main direction that people want to go. We want to improve that as well. So it's just a faster service that truly, again, is competitive with driving.
I want to ask you about which seems to be the center of this plan, at least from a project standpoint, and that is the mobility hub that you've envisioned. Can you talk about that a bit more? Because that's, I mean, at $8.6 billion, the vision of it being as large as it is really, really exciting and is going to have a huge impact throughout the state, let alone San Diego County.
Thank you, John. I mean, we actually think that what makes this plan what it is it's thinking big. So we're thinking LA Union Station, we're thinking New York Grand Central, we're thinking that big. So we're proposing to build a central mobility hub. We call it San Diego Grand Central, and it will be probably one of the largest in the Western United States, where we get all the rail existing and planned to come in. But it's more than that. It's more than just a transit-oriented development. This is where we're going to have 5,000 to 10,000 housing units. This is where we're going to have millions of square foot of office space. So you could actually literally live, work there, or come there to entertain. Like you go to New York Grand Central to have a cup of coffee in a nice coffee shop and watch people come and go. This right now, we started what we call the notice preparation. We're looking at three alternatives. One is we signed an MOU with the United States Navy to redevelop 72 acres World War II warehouses.
This will go on their property.
Yeah, and their properties, okay. And we will link the hub to the airport.
Okay.
That's one option. The other option is in downtown San Diego. So we build the Civic Center, like if you've been to New York Monahan Station, where it's, it's an iconic kind of Grand Central for San Diego with, again, 11 million square foot of development. And the third option is by the Karnak rental car facilities in San Diego. Once we, I think the end of this year, we're going to settle in making one of these options a preferred option. But like you said, if we go on the Navwar side with the United States Navy, that's at least a $6 billion investment. If we go on downtown, that's $8.6 billion investment. That's a lot of jobs. That's a future that I think the new generation, not my generation, I'm the old guy, but your generation and Coleen's and Ray's is going to probably aspire to, where we still want people to be able to drive if they want to, but we want that drive to be safer, faster, and we want to make sure that those who cannot afford to drive have access to transportation, because that means they have access to jobs. So we're excited about the mobility hub. That's the large one. Coleen will tell you that we have about 30 of them around the San Diego region. The largest one being the central one, but the other 29, we have one at the border, the San Jacinto. We have one in North County. We have every part of San Diego have a potential for redevelopment, for building the housing we need. I mean, right now, especially if you're a young professional, cannot afford to live in San Diego. We want to change that. So, Coleen, you want to add to that on the mobility hubs?
Yeah, I think we have a great opportunity with the mobility hubs. And one of the unique things about the San Diego region is that our growth is really focused in the western third of the region near the coast. So that's how we can make these big infrastructure investments, and they make a big difference in people's lives. So again, like Hasan said, nearly 30 mobility hubs. So these are the areas of focused growth throughout all of our communities. And there's opportunities for a mobility hub in virtually every one of our major communities. So it's a really exciting opportunity for communities to think about how their areas can be enhanced, everything from where you walk and where you bike. So it's that granular level of transportation when we talk about the system, all the way into the higher speed commuter rail that would come into a central mobility hub. I think another exciting project is the third border crossing, and maybe Ray could talk a little bit about that and how, there's many aspects there that are important to the economy and how goods move throughout the region.
Ray, before we go there, I just wanted to kind of dig into the housing piece of this. Because it's so interested how the transportation planning is so integrated with housing, the need for more housing, more affordable housing, and how the location of that is really now seen as an economic driver and actually is central to your transportation plan being effective. If you think about maybe my parents and grandparents' generation, kind of, post-war, the 50s build-up, that wasn't thought of in that way. They were two separate and distinct things, and there are well-documented negative effects that we're still dealing with today. And you're, if I could be so presumptive to say, trying to correct decades of that type of planning. Could you just add a bit more to your vision about how housing and transportation and whomever wants to? Yeah,
sure. In the last 20 years, the San Diego region has not been able to build enough housing to keep up just with our natural increase in population. And our estimates show that we're behind by probably 100,000 housing units in the region. Okay. And so locating these houses or these units strategically around transportation hubs really is part of the foundation of the plan, is to create these areas in these mobility hubs where people can live and they can get to an alternate form of transportation so they're not forced to use an automobile. All of our past land use plans had new housing developments being built out in the unincorporated areas where essentially what you ended up doing was creating longer and longer commutes for people to come into the employment centers. Those employment centers are not going to move, and there's not going to be new ones created out in the middle of what is now vacant land. And so by being able to bring these housing units closer into where transportation is, we're going to see a lot more usage of this system. The other thing that we didn't cover is that this transportation plan is driven by the changes in technology that are occurring in the transportation industry over the next 30 years. And there's going to be a tremendous amount of changes that occur that really make these mobility hubs very viable, because you will be able to connect to different forms of transportation from your telephone. Right now, these things are disconnected, if you will. And so what technology does is it creates these areas, not only where you live, but you're connected to everything that's happening there. You can call an autonomous vehicle that would be shared, to be electric. It would be a flexible type of a vehicle that you would take to wherever you needed to go. And that's the transportation of the future. And that's what we're planning to do with this regional plan in San Diego.
John, I mean, you put your hand on something that not many people are willing to talk about, the sins of the past, right? We said, let's go to the suburb and build houses, and let's have the jobs in the center and people will commute. And what we got a mess of congestion. But then when we start to correct that and jobs spread out, housing becomes so unreachable for many, especially young people, that I honestly think oftentimes this is probably the biggest challenge facing California today. Can we keep this golden state golden and make sure that the talent we educate in our great universities, whether it's the UC system or the Cal State system, don't go out? And the answer is yet to be seen. And Ray, what Ray's saying is, if we don't build this 100,000 housing units we need in San Diego, and if we don't build the hundreds of thousands we need in California, we're going to find ourselves falling behind. I think our vision for transportation is, would you rather look at a ghost parking lot, or would you rather look at a beautiful development that has retail, housing, places for people to come and entertain? That's what mobility hubs do. Mobility hubs is a great opportunity to redevelop and supply housing that we do not have today.
Thank you for that. That's really just fascinating to hear, and how, we don't want to talk about the sins of the past, and we will always need roads and freeways, but to think how people move given what state law requires in terms of future planning. I find it just fascinating how you folks are using data and really kind of ingenuity and forward thinking to map this plan out. But I did just preempt the previous thing about connecting airports, which is another critical piece of your transportation plan. So if you, Ray, I believe you wanted to jump in on that.
I just wanted to say a little bit more about the mobility hubs. You mentioned using data, and one of the things that we're doing is we're using data to look at different community characteristics. We've done a tremendous amount of analytics to really understand the type of people that live, that make up the San Diego region, and the type of activities that they like to do, and the areas that they live in. And this is way more sophisticated and advanced than using just raw demographics. And what it's going to allow us to do is to work with our local jurisdictions when we're building these mobility hub concepts out, to really put the infrastructure in these mobility hubs that's right for that particular neighborhood. or that community. So in some cases, it may be restaurants with nightlife. In another place, it may be parks where children would come and play, and there would be children museums, for instance. And so each community has its own characteristics. And these mobility hubs can be designed in a way where they really enhance the local communities. And then we have transportation options that tie them together. That's a fundamental tenet of this plan.
And I think to build on that, that helps us with the concerns around gentrification as well. We want to make sure that as mobility hubs and as we continue to grow in the region, we're not displacing the residents who are there. How can they still afford to be there and still feel connected with the community?
Yeah, I appreciate that. That's almost barrier of entry to building a mobility hub, making sure there's community involvement and community stabilization around that. I appreciate you bringing that up. Would you like to talk more about the airport connection?
The airport, sure. And San Diego has, it's the only actually major urban region in the world that has a one runway airport.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
The good news is if you're a traveler, you don't have to wait long in the plane,
right?
And because you need to free the runway so you can, other planes could take off. It's actually an airport that is handling 22 million annual passengers a year with one runway, believe it or not.
Wow.
That's amazing. But obviously, the airport rebuilt Terminal 2, and now they're starting rebuilding Terminal 1. So they're putting a lot of investment, and our mobility hub will connect to the airport. Having said that, a one-runway airport is limited. And so instead of trying to go and move the airport and look, and for years, San Diego has looked at other sites for airports. We thought, wait a minute, there is 19 miles east of us, there's what's called TIJ, Tijuana International Airport. And that airport has the Border Express, which is a U.S.-Mexico facility where you could go into the facility, move through the door, and you cross from the U.S., and there is agreement how to do that. And you could get into the Tijuana. So we're proposing to link these two airports with high-speed rail, where it actually will take you less time than if you're going from one terminal to another in Denver or Chicago or London, Heathrow, etc. Mm-hmm. And so that idea was part of us reimagining how we connect our people. And if I'm sure you travel in the world, if you go to Europe, there is almost unimaginable to think to go and use driving to go to an airport. That's the kind of system we're looking for. Coleen, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think that it presents an incredible opportunity for the region. The other thing that we've looked at in the plan is about goods movement. And so a major part of goods movement in the region are trucks. And so how do we really try to address that? A lot of trucks crossing the border. That's why I think the third border crossing is another investment that's included in the plan.
Yeah, so right now we have two major crossings between San Diego and Mexico, and it is the busiest land entry port in the Western Hemisphere, with about 37 million people crossing the border each year pre-COVID. And sometimes these trucks are waiting 5, 6 or more hours to get across the border with their goods. It could be strawberries, for instance, that are sitting in the sun for 6 hours. Perishable goods or goods that go back and forth across the border with manufacturing firms that essentially, continuously add value back and forth. And it's expensive to do business this way when you have these trucks idling, and it creates a lot of greenhouse gas emissions. So we're just about to break ground in the next year or two on a third border crossing that would be a tolled facility that would allow us, it would be all high tech, which means that they could scan the trucks as they go through. And we would be able to manage the tolls to keep the wait times optimized and therefore bring across the most amount of traffic possible. So it would be for passenger vehicles also, but a lot to get the goods movement across the U.S.-Mexican border.
So Mexico right now actually surpassed China in terms of our largest trading partner with the U.S. And most of that trade is done through the Imperial, Calexico, and San Diego. Mm-hmm. The Ray touched on something. That's why we think technology is going to take over the transportation sector. So if you come to this new border crossing, and if you're trying to cross from Mexico, about half an hour before you get to the border, you would know how much it's going to take you. You'd actually can pay and check and do all of that through technology. And we're right now, as we speak, installing the technologies to allow us to do that, working with the Mexican government. So very innovative concept, like Ray said, that's driven by data. And data is going to determine whether it's going to be successful or not. But John, I just, on the things that Coleen and Ray talked about in the plan, there was one thing that I will always be proud of, that we tackled very politically hot issues in San Diego of how to fund the plan.
Mm-hmm.
And I want your listeners to know that we put measures in the plan, but that's not the final thing. Eventually, people in San Diego is going to decide how we fund the plan. Not Sandag, not the staff, not the board.
Voters will decide.
Voters will decide. And voters said, I don't want a road charge. I want instead to get property tax increases, or I want sales tax. As the voters will decide that, not Sandag. And we are required by law to identify reasonable available sources. But there's a misconception there. There's people trying to put fear into people. Say, oh my gosh, they're going to tax you. No, we're not. We don't have that authority. But we definitely have a desire to build the system of the future for the next generation, for our kids and grandkids, those who are here, those who are not born yet. And I believe this plan does it.
Well, it's a tremendous plan worth $163 billion, which is represents such a big vision and such a, over time, will have such a transformational impact on San Diego County. Speaking for the members of the contracting community as well as organized labor in the construction industry, we love to see these big visions because it means just brass tacks. It means jobs. It means work. And we want to be your partners in helping support your vision for this. I commend you for doing the politically challenging thing. We'll sort through in the weeks and months ahead. And as your partner, we want to help you sort through the truth from the myths and what opponents will say. We view this as a tremendous opportunity. And again, want to commend the three of you for putting this plan together and your attempts to fund it and overcome some political obstacles. Your great grandchildren will be thanking you.
Yeah, and I just, John, you're new to this job. You hit the ground running. We're really impressed with what we're trying to do. But Rebuild Southern California Partnership is our partner. Like you said, it's a two-way street. Partnership means we now work together toward a better future. So I want to thank you very much, the three, on behalf of the three of us, for doing the work you're doing and for allowing us to speak to you.
Well, you're very welcome. And let me thank you for your work and your time here today. Well, folks, that's all for this episode. Thank you for listening, and be sure to subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts so you'll never miss an episode. Take care.